Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody. I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Fran Hauser. Fran is a startup investor, longtime media executive, author, and champion of women and girls. Through her investing, writing, and speaking, Fran works to level the playing field for women. Her list of accomplishments is impressive, but as you'll hear, what's most impressive is how she's navigated her career while staying true to herself and inspiring others to do the same. She's invested in over 30 female-founded companies. Yay! Written 2 books to help women realize their full career potential and done over 200 talks. Much of her current work is informed by the 20 years she spent in corporate as both a C-suite executive and a mentor to hundreds of women. Her first book, The Myth of the Nice Girl, Achieving a Career You Love Without Becoming a Person You Hate, has been translated into 6 languages and was named Best Business Book of the Year 2018 by Audible. Fran's new book, Embrace the Work, Love Your Career, is quickly becoming the go-to for women seeking more joy and fulfillment in their career. Please join me in welcoming Fran Hauser. Welcome, Fran.
Hi, Tammy. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to have you here, especially because as we just spoke for a moment before we turned on record, I told you that your most recent book, a workbook, a delightful workbook, is in the resources section of my book that came out a few months ago. So let's get to it. Fran, tell us the younger years, the earlier Fran. Where did you begin? How did your beginnings possibly inform where you are today?
So my story really begins with my parents, who were Italian immigrants, and moved to a town called Mount Kisco, just north of Manhattan, when I was 2. And, I'm the oldest of 4 kids. And because my parents didn't speak English, and they were small business owners. So my dad owned a landscaping business and my mother owned a tailoring business. I ended up going to work for them at a very, very young age. So I tell people, and, people are always shocked to hear, when I was in 1st grade, I was actually writing invoices.
Oh my goodness.
Dad's business. And I was hanging out at my mom's tailoring shop and helping her. So I was their translator. I would do their invoicing. I was my dad's human GPS. Like if he had to go find a job, he didn't know how to get there. So I literally had the map opened, in my lap, and we would drive and we would find it. So
wow.
From a very young age, I got involved in business, which, I think really kind of informed and shaped my career. And then the other big thing that I always like to talk about is that because my parents didn't speak English, especially when I was very, very young, they really had to rely on nonverbal skills when they were communicating with their clients. So it was something that I really paid attention to. Like my dad was just always so charming and he was always smiling and, he would place his hand on the person's shoulder and look them in the eyes and so kind and so warm. And I think I just, I really paid close attention to that because it made me realize how important it is, to be kind, to be warm in terms of developing relationships and building trust. And that very much shaped me as a leader, as a compassionate leader, as someone who really values kindness, and eventually inspired The Myth of the Nice Girl, my first book.
Wow. That's amazing. That is incredible. So when did you kind of connect those dots from those early years, your parents, influence in that way, their ability to connect with people and then seeing that through yourself as a leader?
I think it was very early on, really in my career, where like I started getting some bad advice from a couple of people that would tell me that I was too nice and that I needed to develop a tougher personality if I wanted to get ahead. And I was very impressionable, right? Especially like your first job or your second job, out of college. And I actually there was one instance where I listened to that advice. And I actually behaved in a way that looking back, like with hindsight, I really wasn't proud of. I basically went over someone's head to get something done.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up really damaging my relationship with that person. And I had to go into repair mode and, ask her to go out to lunch and apologize genuinely, from the heart. And I was able to repair that relationship, but, it was really a wake-up call for me that that's just not who I am.
Right. Right.
That's not who I am. Relationships are really important to me. And I think that bringing who you are as a human being to work is really important, showing up in a way that's really aligned with your values. And that's sort of when I connected the dots that that's what my parents always did. They never sacrificed who they were to get ahead. They always brought their human being, their authentic selves. They always brought that to work. So I think that was kind of the moment for me where I really was able to connect the dots.
Wow. So I assume you grew up, all your growing up years were in the Mount Kisco area.
Yeah.
And you still are located in that part of the New York area, right?
I am. I'm in the next town over. I didn't go very far. And my parents are still in Mount Kisco, and my sister and my brothers are still in the area.
Oh, how nice.
Big extended family.
Oh, wow.
So a wonderful community.
Nice. So I would imagine also then that your parents having lots of different customers and clients, and I'm sure different kinds of personalities, they were able to also model for you how you deal with different personalities and different people and still bring about that kind of kindness despite having to deal with different personalities along the way. And I'm also from the New York area, so I know that sometimes people can be kind of tough. So I imagine you had some really good role models in that way.
I did. And I think this concept of a role model is really important. I think about my parents, but I also think about throughout my career, when I noticed a leader where I really loved the way that they led.
Yeah.
I would pay very close attention. I would really I'd watch them in meetings, I would watch them. If they get, asked a really difficult question, how do they respond? Both verbally and non-verbally. I always I love learning from people. I love observing people. I remember when I was at Time Inc., our CEO, and more, she would have meetings where she would bring 10 to 15 people in to say a breakfast. She would always start the meeting by asking each of us to share something that we were grateful for. And it was such a beautiful way to start the meeting, and it reminded me okay, yeah, she's the CEO of our company. She has these major business goals that she needs to achieve. But the fact that she's taking time to connect with every single one of us and to be very thoughtful about the tone of the meeting, that's something that, that she was a role model for me in that moment.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think modeling behavior, really looking out for the people who you really respect the way that they show up and the way that they lead, and what can you learn from them? Sometimes we have these formal mentors, but then other times we can learn just through observation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can imagine also observing the impact that that has on the other people around you, your colleagues, your peers, and how that even just ripples out can make a huge difference on the culture of the organization too.
Absolutely. Because like I noticed in those meetings that like sometimes people were walking into the meetings with a lot of like you could see it like this stress and like visibly like you could see that they have a lot on in their going on in their head and a lot on their plates and it's almost like their shoulders just like came down 3 inches.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you could visualize it, it's like
Yeah.
it's like she gave them and gave every single person in that room the opportunity to just take a breath, and so that does affect the culture. And it's something that then the managers in that room can take to their teams. Right. So I feel so blessed to just have had so many incredible role models and people like Anne,
Wow. Well, take us through that a little bit. Some of the different. I mean, you've worked in a number of different industries and different roles. I'm curious about your earlier education and then how that some of the decisions you made, some of the industries you worked in, and some of those choices. Just curious to take us through that a little bit, and then we'll talk about what you're doing now. But I'm always curious about that because those things are formative in a variety of ways, and how they, and then how do you decide then that you're going to be, an entrepreneur or have your own business, because it sounds like you did have so many positive experiences working as part of, what I would call, entities that were bigger than yourself. Right. So
yeah.
Take us through some of that.
No, and look, I think it's like so many people, I've had many different chapters to my career.
Yeah.
And I always say this to college students who are really stressed out about what to major in and what the first job is going to be. And, I look at like my career, I majored in public accounting.
Really?
Is so different from what I'm doing now, right? The reason I majored in public accounting was because I was the first in my family to go to college. My parents really weren't able to guide me through the process. It's not like they never went through it themselves. They didn't have a network of people that could be helpful to me.
Right.
So when I went to college, I was just kind of like, this is what I did when I was younger for my dad. I did his invoices. I did accounting. I'm, good at it. You can make like a good living doing it. So that's basically how I made my decision, and I started out working at Price Waterhouse. And then I went to Ernst & Young. I worked for like some of the big firms, realized that it wasn't something that I really wanted to do forever, so I ended up going to work for one of my clients, Coca-Cola Enterprises.
Okay.
It's still in finance. Like I was working in financial reporting. And I moved up. I had, got a couple of promotions while I was there. I was like a director of finance for the New York division when I was in my late 20s, which was amazing. But then I realized like, I want to do more. Like I really wanted to run all aspects of a business. I kept seeing myself as like a general manager or a president, like that kind of role. And this executive recruiter called me one day about a job that was open at an early stage company called Movie Phone. I don't know if you remember Movie Phone.
Sure.
777 film.
Yeah.
And, I took the call. I met with the founders. And what I really liked about the opportunity was that because it was a smaller company, it would allow me to really roll up my sleeves and get involved in different parts of the company. Like, even though it was a head of finance role, I remember talking to the founders about, I'd love to get involved in marketing and sales and technology and operations. And, because I knew I was not going to be able to do that at Coke because it's just such a big company, right? And it's so siloed. And so it was a big risk for me to leave one of the world's most admired companies to go to work for an early stage company. This was back in 1997.
Right.
But I was really excited about the internet. And, they had just launched moviephone.com. Like they were launching showtimes and movie tickets, online. And so I was really excited about that. And I was really excited about the idea of, personally and professionally being able to grow by working at a small. So it was a calculated risk that I took. And it really worked out because it really was the beginning of my media career. And we ended up selling the company to AOL. The founders retired. And then I ended up moving into a general manager role. I was running Moviephone as a division of AOL.
Okay. Okay.
So it really worked out beautifully, because then from there, I ended up moving over to Time Inc., where I was running the digital business at Time Inc. So, for brands like People Magazine and InStyle, Entertainment Weekly, really like launching the digital extensions of those brands. And I was at Time Inc. for 10 years. I loved my time there. And then the other big pivot I made was I moved to startup investing about 8 years ago. I left corporate because my kids were really young.
Yeah.
I wanted to create a professional life that had much more flexibility in it. So I decided that I wanted to go work for myself. And I was working with a lot of startups when I was at Time because I was in digital. So I was meeting founders, so some pretty, I made some pretty big pivots in my career.
Yeah. But it sounds like there was a way in which it evolved. It does sound evolutionary, like, you started with Moviephone as director of finance, but you had a vision. You saw that you had an opportunity to learn about different parts of the operation. And then once AOL acquired them, you were able to really, it sounds like, really be able to almost, tell me if I'm right about this, really almost officially take the finance hat off and really generalize yourself even more, it sounds like, right?
Absolutely. That was like my first formal general manager role.
Yeah.
And I do think it's important to think about the intentionality. Like I was very purposeful in terms of thinking through leaving Coca-Cola to go to Moviephone. And by the way, there was a lot of pressure for me to stay, right? I was getting calls from the CFO of Coca-Cola corporate, saying, look, Fran, we see you. You could be the CFO of the Coca-Cola company one day. Like that's the path that you're on. Are you sure that you really want to walk away from that? Because what they were seeing was I was leaving that to go to this really risky internet, early stage, company. And it was scary, but when I really thought through the opportunity that was in front of me, and I knew that I really did want to move more into a general management role. I wasn't going to get that by staying at Coke.
Right.
So I needed to do something, and I really liked the founders when I met them. I liked the senior management team.
Yeah.
I liked what I was seeing in terms of the culture. And when they made that commitment to me that, yes, Fran, we're happy for you to get involved in other areas of the company. So I'm so glad, with hindsight, that I made that move. It was a really important move for me in my career.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you were making those decisions, did you discuss that with anyone else? Did you discuss it with here you were, first generation. Your parents were business people, but also immigrants to this country. I can imagine, though, still, when I think about people of that generation, very attached to sort of stick with it, security and stability kind of mentality. Like, how did they respond or react to your decision to leave, Coca-Cola, such a household name of, security and stability? Like, how were they when you told them you were moving along?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think a part of them was definitely torn because they loved the stability and the size.
Yeah.
the influence of Coca-Cola. But, I just remember like my mom in particular saying, Fran, you make good decisions, like you've made throughout your career, because she says it to this day, like you didn't have us to guide you. We weren't capable, right? Like my mother will say that we were not capable of guiding you in making these big career decisions because my parents just, they never had that experience themselves. They were small business owners, but they didn't understand like corporate America or like the startup world, the .com bubble. I mean, like, so they just really, I think the role that they took was more of giving me the confidence and reminding me of what I'm capable of and how I'm capable of making really good decisions. So for them, they were always more of like my cheerleaders and my emotional supporters, as opposed to like giving me concrete career advice. Like, right. So I think, and I really respected that. But, I had my husband, who's amazing, my sister, who are always my go-tos when I'm making these big decisions, because they both very much know what my values are, and they'll call me out.
Yeah.
If I'm, maybe leaning towards something that's not totally aligned with my values, maybe I'm a little starstruck or right. Or there's something that's just so exciting, but you need those people in your life who really, really know your values.
Yeah. Yeah. They kind of bring you back down to earth a little bit.
They bring you back down. They bring you back. Even it's so funny. After I wrote my first book, The Myth of the Nice Girl, I was getting a lot of pressure. It was like 2 months after the book came out, I was getting a lot of pressure to start working on a second book. And my husband was like, Fran, you just spent like years of your life working on this book. Maybe you need a minute, to just like take a step back, recharge, rest a little bit, and he was right. And I'm so glad I listened to him, because my second book ended up coming out 4 years later. I waited about 3 years to work on the second book. So sometimes you just need those people that are going to remind you to check in with yourself.
Yeah. I would say probably most of the time you need those people, especially if they have your best interests at heart, right? I mean, sometimes we've had people in our lives who have their own agenda, but it sounds like you've got people in your corner who really do know how to support you, but also understand what your values are. I think that most of us, I believe that nobody is successful in a vacuum, that we all got somewhere because there were others in our corner too,
Absolutely. I always say, like, you don't have to go through this career journey alone.
No.
Right? Like, we all have those people. They might be mentors. They might be champions. They might just be personal friends. I think about like every career pivot that I made, and every like big milestone, like promotion or like leaving one company to go to another company. There's always at least one person who is there for me, to help me, like either like guide me through the decision or open up their network to people who can give me data points that might be helpful, as I'm deciding. Right. So we always have those people. And sometimes, guess what? They're not senior to you. Sometimes they have less experience than you do,
I love that you said that. Yes.
When I was at Time Inc. and I'd been there 8 years and I was starting to get that itch and I was starting to think about like my kids and like, what do I want to do next? I had coffee with this young woman, Soraya Darby, who's probably in her late 20s. She was a founder of a company. And she said to me, she said, Fran, I have so many female friends in New York City who are looking to launch businesses. But when they look up, they don't see any female investors, advisors, mentors. You could be that person. Like, she planted the seed in my head. You could be that person. And she's like, because she said, you love advising, you love mentoring, You love helping people think through problems and helping people build their businesses. And, and she also shared a statistic with me that was shocking, that only 2% of venture capital funding dollars go to women. So 98% goes to men. Only 2% goes to women. So I was like, wow, I could actually be a part of changing that ratio. So she's the one that planted that seed for me. And so I started out as a side hustle. I just started investing and advising startups while I was at Time Inc. I started as a side hustle. And then I realized, wow, I really love this. I want to do this full time.
Wow.
Now it's what I've been doing for the last 8 years. I like dabbling too. I feel like that's something to think about if you're thinking about a career pivot. Can you start small? Just to see, because what if I started doing it and I realized I don't really enjoy this? It would have been it was such a big move to leave media to go into startup investing. So if there's a way that you can kind of try before you buy,
Yes.
I highly encourage it.
I think that's a very, very good piece of advice. I actually just had a conversation with somebody about that yesterday. Really trying to come up with kind of a part-time kind of scenario. In fact, that's how I started my business. I got a piece of advice like that, to, instead of just leaving full-time work and going completely full-time on my own, start with, a part-time role somewhere as kind of a financial anchor, and then build my own business part-time. And that's what I did for many, many years until I felt comfortable going full-time on my own. And it was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
I love it.
And when you say dabbling, it really is, it almost sounds a little unfocused, but I think what you're saying is you're really dabbling to experiment, to try things, but there's an intention behind it too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There is definitely an intention.
Yeah.
And for me, I remember during that time, I decided, very intentionally to focus on the startup investing and advising. But I also decided that I wanted to get more involved with nonprofits. And I remember taking, a very important board role, actually, at Global Giving. I was even kind of toying with the idea of would I want to do nonprofit work full time? So it's I had both of these kind of experiments going, at the same time. Was very intentional. And even when I think about the way that I was building out my network at that time, I remember looking up one day and realizing that everyone in my network, everybody was pretty much in media, just like me. And I was very interested in the technology sector, and I was very interested in the nonprofit sector. And I prioritized meeting people in those sectors because I felt it was very important to me, if eventually I wanted to move into startup investing or, into nonprofit space, to really get to know people, to get to know people, to be curious,
right?
To wonder, to ask questions,
right?
To really get a feel for what it's like. What is your day-to-day like? All of that is so important when you're making these big decisions.
Absolutely. You just said all the magic words that I think about when I think about people, finding their next thing or thinking about what would be more meaningful for them, that the whole notion of, getting more information and just being curious and talking to people. And those things, they sound so simple. And yet for some people, you and the way you talk about it, Fran, it just rolls right off your tongue. These are the things I'm interested in. And I talk to people, but we know that for some people, those things are really challenging to do that, even if they're really deeply interested in those things. It sounds like it comes pretty naturally for you. What do you suggest to people who really do find themselves feeling challenged by that?
Yeah. Well, and I do know that many people find it almost daunting, like the idea of, reaching out to people and setting up like coffee dates or Zooms or right.
Yeah.
So, I always say just like start with one person. Just start by reaching out to one person who you think is like really interesting. Maybe if you could get a warm introduction to them, that's always great, right? But look, I remember reading the book Half the Sky by Nick Kristof and Cheryl Woodon, which is a really incredible book. And at the end of it, they talked about, just like you have your resource section in your book, Tammy.
Yeah. Yeah.
They had a resource section in their book, and global giving was on that list. And I've read about global giving in their book, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so interested in what this organization is doing that I tracked down the CEO of the organization online. I found her email, and I just sent her an email, and I said, hi, I'm Fran. I work at People Magazine, and I love what you're doing, and I want to see if I can be helpful. Would love to connect whenever you're in the city next. Mari, sent me a note back saying, I'd love to do that. We got together in person. I got to know her. 2 years later, I joined her board. I was on her board for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And, so that goes back to like the being curious and the wondering and like, and I reached out. What was the worst thing that could happen? She didn't respond.
Right. Although I'm sure it didn't hurt that you said you work at People Magazine.
For sure. For sure. I definitely threw that in.
Yeah. No, look, I mean, you have to absolutely, right?
But look, the other thing that I'll say too is I'm so impressed by how some younger women reach out to me, like on LinkedIn or on Instagram. Like this one woman reached out to me to say that she loved the book and that she had some follow-up questions that she would love to ask me. And she said that, she's a social media expert and she did some research on my portfolio companies. And she noticed that there were a couple of companies that had a weaker social media presence, and she had specific ideas for how they could have a stronger presence. What I love about that is we talk about this all the time, how relationships should be mutually beneficial, right?
Absolutely.
So she came into it with the approach of how can I be helpful?
Yes.
That's the thing. Like we can all be helpful to other people.
That's right.
So it's not just don't reach out and say, can I pick your brain?
Oh, never.
Never. Right. Because you're not going to get a positive response to that. But if you reach out by saying that you're a fan, you love their work, you would love to have a brief call with them, and that you have some thoughts and ideas for them, be like very specific.
Yes.
People are just more likely to say yes.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's key I think about those people who say, oh, but I sound so needy, or I sound, this or that. It's like, first of all, get over yourself. And absolutely great example. Think about what do you have to offer? I often will suggest to my clients who are feeling that they don't have anything to offer. I say, all you have to do is just say to someone, well, how can I be helpful to you?
Oh my gosh, can I tell you seriously? I always say, and like when you do get the meeting, at the very end of the meeting, I always say you should end it with two questions. How can I be helpful to you? And is there someone else you think I should meet?
Absolutely.
Right? Because it's like, why not? They might have an incredible person in their network who would be so perfect for you to meet.
That's right.
So it's a missed opportunity if you don't ask that question.
That's right. That's right. And you are as deserving of all of that information or those connections as anyone else. And don't tell yourself otherwise.
People genuinely like to be helpful.
Yes.
Most people do.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's more of like the whole like scarcity and abundance that really plays into this, doesn't it?
It does all the time. I mean, there's a great book that I often recommend to people. It's called Scarcity. It's all about social economics. Great book.
Good to know.
Yeah, it's a great book. I can't pronounce the author's names because they're multiple syllables. But if you just look it up, scarcity.
Scarcity. Good.
It's like scarcity, why having so much means so little, or something like that. It's a great book. I heard one of the authors speak once. It just really lays it out beautifully. So, Fran, let's talk about the workbook. Embrace the work, love your career. A guided workbook for realizing your career goals with clarity, intention, and confidence. I feel like we've already been walking through it in some ways with what we've been talking about. The book, I have to tell the listeners, the book is, I don't use these words easily. I'm not somebody who is full of superlatives. The book is absolutely visually gorgeous. It is so beautiful. It is so accessible. And I love the way it weaves. It's like weaving different parts of your brain and different parts of your soul throughout the book. There's parts of the book that you go in and out of mindfulness practices and then very practical, hands-on kinds of tasks. It's divided up into sections. And I'm not telling you, Fran, this, you know this, you wrote it. I'm telling the reader, it's 6 sections. Fall in love with your career, design your career action plan, create time and space. I love that section where it really, in very simple, accessible ways, how to really get yourself organized and really think through how to develop priorities in ways that, you know, most of us, you think we know how to do already, but we're always learning how to better, you know, do that. You know, taking stuff off your list, your to-don't list. I love that.
I love that too.
You know your value, build your dream team, and then reflect and reset. It's just, you know, and then at the end, you have a love your career toolkit. I mean, it's this, I'm cherishing this workbook that you've created.
Tammy, thank you. Thank you so much for saying that.
I'm not saying that lightly. I am not someone who does that, but it is, and it's a beautifully put together. I'm having just written a book myself. I'm like, the pages are beautiful quality. It's just, I don't know. I just can't say enough good things about it.
Thank you. Because, you know, we put so much thought into every single part of the book, the paperweight.
Yes.
You know, we even I remember testing different pens, writing on it to make sure, because there's a lot of writing right in the book. And I love, and you have your pen.
I got the jotters that you sent out. They're beautiful.
Oh my gosh. But it was such a joy. It was such a joy to work on this book. It was such a different experience than my first book. I mean, I loved working on The Myth of the Nice Girl, but that's more like your traditional 60,000 word narrative prescriptive book, right? This book, because the design is so important and there's so many writing prompts and reflections and exercises. And, you know, I was saying to you before we started recording that it actually took longer to design the book than it did to write the words. And we found this amazing young illustrator, Regina Schlovsky, who did such a beautiful job. I loved working with her. The book is in 4 color.
It's gorgeous.
Right? So I really wanted people to just feel happy, you know, while they were working through these exercises.
And it does that. I mean, it really, exactly, it does that. I think because I'm such a career junkie, it just does that. I couldn't wait till the book came out. I put this in my resources section before it even came out. I just knew it was going to do this.
Well, I'm glad that it met your expectations.
Yeah, me too. So what is your greatest hope for this workbook?
You know, when I go back to my inspiration for it, which really I just came I came up with the idea for this book just about a year ago. I mean, it came together very quickly. I was really inspired to write this book when I saw how many millions of women were leaving the workforce, during the pandemic, and how many millions more were questioning their career purpose and their career path. We're all going through this existential crisis, right? We're questioning the meaning of everything in our lives. So really my hope for the workbook is that it's truly helpful to women, as they're thinking through, like, how can they find joy in their work and in their career? I want this to be, I like saying this is a workbook and it's a playbook.
Yes.
It's both. It's a workbook and a playbook to help you find joy and fulfillment in your work and in your career.
Absolutely.
That's really my hope for it.
Yeah, I mean, it really does cut through, as I said, a lot of layers and levels. It as I say, it's like a beautiful fabric. It really does allow you to weave through the many layers and levels of who you are as a person and how you can bring that really to yourself purposefully in your life. And that's the way I like to think of careers. And I think that's what you're putting out here.
Yes.
It's a beautiful thing. You also talk about, I love the way you use language and the way you play off a language. You talk about RBGs.
Oh my gosh, RBGs, a total nod to the legend herself.
Yes, yes.
But an acronym for really big goals.
Yes.
I think it's really important. Sometimes it's so easy to get mired in our to-do lists and our everyday tasks. And I think what you said, when you use the word intentional, that's really what I want this book to do. I want it to help women be intentional about their careers.
Yeah.
It's like a little bit of a reset. When we do food resets, we put like 5 to 7 days aside, right? And we go through the process of the reset. And I really believe like this book can be a reset. It's 6 sections, set aside 6 days, a couple of hours each day. It's such a gift to yourself to get out of autopilot mode, and do the reflection, do the work. Like that's actually why I called it Embrace the Work, Love Your Career, because in order to love your career, you have to do the work.
Absolutely.
And this is the work. This book is the work.
It is. And it really is. I can't say, well, I can say enough good things about it. I've already said a lot of them. I wish we could go on and on and on here, Fran. This has been such a joy. What's the best way for people to find you and your work and learn more about what you're up to?
So my website is franhauser.com. So everything is available there.
Yeah.
All the books, and I have a blog, and you could sign up for my newsletter. And on social media, I'm at Fran_Hauser on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn.
Great. And Hauser is Hauser. Just want to make sure people get that.
Thank you. Tammy, I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Seriously. And I'm so excited for your book. I just ordered it.
Oh my gosh. I'm so honored. Thank you so much.
Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you so much, Fran. I'm just thrilled to have you here today. And I look forward to more conversations. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Fran Hauser. It was so delightful to speak with her and learn about her background and professional transitions. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygoularloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 177. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my new book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available now in print and ebook editions through my website, Amazon Worldwide, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, and through your local library. If you were inspired by this episode with Fran, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And please subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd really appreciate reading your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at tammygoolerloeb.com. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.